The gunshot that killed Helena Foster's husband echoed through the canyon for 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds, her entire world shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together again. It was April of 1873 in Angels Camp, California, a gold mining town that had seen better days but still clung to the hope that prosperity might return with the next big strike. Helena stood at Thomas's grave on a windswept hill overlooking their modest homestead, her black dress whipping around her ankles, her face as pale and still as the marble headstones that dotted the cemetery. She was 24 years old, and she felt ancient. Thomas had been shot during a dispute over a mining claim, caught in the crossfire between two drunk prospectors who couldn't settle their differences with words. He had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong moment, buying supplies at the mercantile when the argument spilled out into the street. The bullet had found him through the window, and he had died before the doctor could even be summoned. 3 years of marriage, gone in an instant. 3 years of building a life together, of planning for children, of dreaming about the ranch they would expand, all reduced to a pine box and a plot of earth. Helena stood at that grave for so long that the preacher and the handful of mourners who had attended the funeral eventually left her there alone. The sun began its descent toward the Sierra Nevada, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed obscenely beautiful for such a terrible day. She did not cry. She had cried herself dry in the 3 days since Thomas's death. Now there was only a hollow emptiness where her heart had been, a void so vast she could not see the bottom of it. "Mrs. Foster," a gentle voice spoke from behind her. "It will be dark soon. Let me walk you home." Helena turned slowly, her movements mechanical. The man standing a respectful distance away was Caleb Jensen, a rancher whose property bordered what had been her and Thomas's land. She knew him only slightly, had seen him in town and exchanged pleasantries at church, but Thomas had spoken well of him. Caleb was 30 years old, tall and lean with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His gray eyes held genuine kindness, something Helena found she could barely look at without feeling that hollow place inside her grow larger. "I can manage," she said, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I do not doubt that, madam," Caleb said carefully, "but I would feel better knowing you got home safely. These hills can be treacherous in the dark." Helena wanted to tell him that she did not care about treacherous hills, that she did not care about anything anymore, but the words would not come. Instead, she simply nodded and began walking down the hill toward the small house she had shared with Thomas. Caleb fell into step beside her, keeping a respectful distance, his presence solid and steady in a world that had become untethered. They walked in silence, the only sounds the crunch of their boots on the rocky path and the evening songs of birds settling in for the night. When they reached her house, Helena paused at the door, her hand on the latch. "Thank you, Mr. Jensen," she said without looking at him. "If you need anything, Mrs. Foster, anything at all, my ranch is just over the ridge. I mean that sincerely." Helena nodded again and went inside, closing the door behind her. She stood in the gathering darkness of her home, surrounded by Thomas's things, his coat still hanging on the peg by the door, his coffee cup still on the table from that last morning. She had not been able to bring herself to move anything, as if by keeping everything exactly as it was, she could somehow keep him from being truly gone. But he was gone, and Helena was alone. The weeks that followed were a blur of gray days and sleepless nights. Helena moved through her routines like a ghost, tending to the small vegetable garden, feeding the chickens, trying to keep the homestead running even though she could not remember why it mattered. She had no family left. Her parents had died of fever when she was 19, and she had married Thomas a year later, grateful to have someone to belong to again. Thomas had been an only child, and his parents had passed before she ever met him. There was no one, nothing, just her and this piece of land that seemed to mock her with its demands. The money Thomas had saved was running out. Helena knew she would need to make decisions soon about what to do, whether to try to sell the property or find work in town, but the thought of making any decision at all felt overwhelming. She existed in a state of frozen suspension, unable to move forward, unable to let go. She stopped going to church, stopped going to town except when absolutely necessary. When she did venture into Angel's Camp for supplies, she could feel the pitying stares of the townspeople, could hear the whispered conversations that stopped when she walked by. Poor Helena Foster, widowed so young, so tragic. What will she do now? She hated their pity almost as much as she hated the emptiness inside her. It was on a scorching day in late May when Helena's carefully maintained numbness began to crack. She had been trying to repair a section of fence that had fallen during a windstorm, her hands blistered and bleeding, sweat soaking through her dress. The fence posts were heavy, too heavy for her to manage alone, and after an hour of struggling, she finally sat down in the dirt and stared at her ruined hands. This was impossible. All of it was impossible. She could not do this alone. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. Caleb Jensen was riding toward her on a handsome bay horse, leading a pack mule behind him. He reined in when he saw her sitting there and quickly dismounted. "Mrs. Foster," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Are you hurt?" "I am fine," Helena said automatically, even though she was clearly not fine. Caleb looked at the fallen fence, then at her bleeding hands, then at her face. "May I help you with this? I can manage." "I am sure you can," Caleb said gently. But there is no shame in accepting help when it is offered freely. Helena wanted to refuse, wanted to send him away, but she was so tired, so desperately, bone-deep tired. She said nothing, which Caleb apparently took as permission. He removed his hat and jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and set to work on the fence. Helena watched him work, his movements efficient and practiced. Within an hour, he had repaired the entire section that would have taken her days to fix, if she could have managed it at all. When he finished, he walked to his mule and retrieved a canteen, offering it to her. "You should get out of this sun, Mrs. Foster. It is brutal today." Helena took a drink, the water wonderfully cool, then handed the canteen back. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Helping me, being kind." "What do you want?" Caleb looked genuinely taken aback. "I do not want anything, Mrs. Foster. You are my neighbor and you have suffered a terrible loss. It is simply the right thing to do. People do not do things without wanting something in return." "Some people do," Caleb said quietly. He put his hat back on and gathered his horse's reins. "I will come by tomorrow to check on the rest of your fencing. Some of the posts on the south side looked like they might need reinforcing before the summer storms come. Mr. Jensen, I cannot pay you. I am not asking to be paid." He swung up into his saddle with easy grace. "Neighbors help neighbors, Mrs. Foster. That is how we survive out here." He rode away before Helena could protest further, leaving her standing there with dirt on her dress and confusion breaking through the numbness that had surrounded her for weeks. She did not know what to make of Caleb Jensen and his seemingly selfless kindness. In her experience, everyone wanted something eventually. But Caleb returned the next day, just as he had promised, and spent the morning reinforcing fence posts. And he came back the day after that to help her clear brush that had grown too close to the house, a fire hazard in the dry California summer. He never asked for payment, never made demands, simply did the work, and then left with a polite tip of his hat. Helena found herself both grateful and resentful of his presence. Grateful because her homestead desperately needed the work, and she could not manage it alone. Resentful because his kindness reminded her that the world still turned, that life still continued, and she was not ready to accept that. She was not ready to feel anything other than the numbness that protected her from the full force of her grief. On the fourth day of Caleb's visits, Helena made coffee and brought him a cup while he worked on repairing the roof of her chicken coop. He accepted it with surprise and thanks. "You do not have to keep coming here," Helena said, though the words came out less harsh than she intended. "I know I do not have to," Caleb replied, taking a sip of the coffee. "But your property needs attention, and I have the time and ability to help. It seems foolish not to." "Do you not have your own ranch to run?" "I do, and I run it just fine. I have 2 hired hands who are more than capable of handling the daily work." He set down his coffee cup and returned to hammering a loose board back into place. "Besides, my ranch runs itself most days." "Cattle are not complicated creatures." "What kind of cattle?" "Herefords, mostly. Some longhorns I bought off a drover passing through. I have about 300 head now and good grazing land. The ranch has done well." It was the most they had spoken since Thomas's funeral. Helena found herself curious despite her desire to remain closed off. "You run it alone." "I do now. I had a partner for the first few years, but he got married and moved to Sacramento with his wife's family. Bought him out 2 years ago." Caleb climbed down from the coop and inspected his work. "That should hold now. Your chickens will not have any drafts come winter." "Thank you," Helena said, the words feeling strange in her mouth. She could not remember the last time she had thanked anyone for anything. Caleb gathered his tools and prepared to leave, but he hesitated, as if weighing whether to speak. Finally, he said, "Mrs. Foster, I know you are grieving, and I know that nothing anyone says can make that better. But I also know that this land will not wait for grief to pass. Summer is coming and you will need to prepare. I would like to continue helping you if you will allow it." "Why?" The question burst out of Helena before she could stop it. "Why do you care what happens to me or my land? You did not even know Thomas well." Caleb met her eyes, his expression serious. "I know what it is like to be alone. I know what it is like to feel like the world has moved on without you and you are just standing still, watching it pass by." He adjusted his hat. "And I know that sometimes the only thing that saves you is when someone refuses to let you disappear into that loneliness." There was something in his voice, some old pain that resonated with Helena's current anguish, that made her believe he truly did understand. She found herself nodding. "You can come back if you want to." "I want to," Caleb said simply, and then he was gone, riding back toward his ranch in the golden afternoon light. That night, for the first time since Thomas's death, Helena cried again. But these tears were different from the ones she had shed before. These tears felt like something breaking open inside her, some frozen dam finally cracking. She cried for Thomas, for the life they would never have, for the children she would never bear him, for all the dreams that had died with him. She cried until she was exhausted, until there was nothing left, and then she slept more deeply than she had in weeks. When she woke the next morning, the sun was streaming through her window and birds were singing outside. The hollow emptiness was still there inside her chest, but it felt slightly smaller somehow, as if crying had washed away some of the darkness. Helena got out of bed and, for the first time in weeks, changed into a clean dress and brushed her hair properly. She looked at herself in the small mirror above her wash basin and barely recognized the gaunt, pale woman staring back at her. But her eyes were clearer than they had been, less haunted. She had coffee and bread for breakfast, then went outside to tend to her garden. The vegetables needed weeding desperately, and she lost herself in the simple, repetitive work. There was something soothing about having her hands in the soil, about nurturing growing things. It did not fix anything, did not bring Thomas back, but it was something to do other than simply exist in her grief. Caleb arrived around mid-morning, and this time Helena greeted him with something approaching civility. He had brought lumber with him, balanced across his pack horse. "I thought we might work on reinforcing your porch today," he said. "Some of those boards are rotting through. Do not want you stepping through and breaking an ankle." "That lumber must have cost a fortune," Helena said, eyeing the quality wood. "I had it left over from a project at my ranch," Caleb said, which Helena suspected was not entirely true, but she did not argue. She was learning that Caleb Jensen was a man who helped because it was in his nature to help, and arguing with him about it was futile. They worked together that day, Helena handing him tools and holding boards steady while he hammered. It felt strange to work alongside someone again, to have another presence in her space, but it was not entirely unpleasant. Caleb had an easy way about him, never pushing conversation but happy to talk when Helena initiated it. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked as they worked. "7 years now. I came out to California in '66, worked as a ranch hand for a few years to learn the business and save money. Bought the land in '67 with my partner, like I said." He lined up another board and hammered it into place with sure strikes. It was rough going at first. The land was wild, no infrastructure, had to build everything from scratch, but I liked that. Liked knowing that everything I built with my own hands. "Where did you come from before California?" "Missouri. Family had a farm there, but I was the youngest of 5 boys. There was no future for me on that farm, not with that many of us trying to make a living off the same land." He paused in his work to wipe sweat from his forehead. "I wanted something that was mine, something I could build from the ground up." Helena understood that desire. She and Thomas had wanted the same thing, a place that belonged to them, where they could build a life together. They had only just started when it was all ripped away. "Do you miss Missouri?" she asked. "Sometimes. I miss my mother mostly. She writes letters, but it is not the same as seeing her." Caleb smiled slightly. "But California is home now. I cannot imagine living anywhere else." They worked in companionable silence for a while, and Helena found her mind wandering. She thought about Caleb's life, about how he had come west alone to build something from nothing. She thought about his quiet kindness, the way he showed up day after day without being asked, without expecting anything in return. She thought about what he had said about knowing what it was like to be alone, and she wondered what pain he carried that he did not speak of. "What happened to make you understand loneliness?" Helena asked suddenly, the question escaping before she could think better of it. Caleb's hands stilled on the hammer. For a moment, Helena thought he would not answer, that she had overstepped. But then he set down his tools and sat back on his heels. "I was engaged once," he said quietly. "Back in Missouri before I came west. Her name was Margaret. We had known each other since we were children, and everyone assumed we would marry. I assumed it too." He stared out at the horizon, his gray eyes distant. "But then I told her I wanted to go to California to buy land and start a ranch. I thought she would come with me, thought we would build a life together out here." "She did not want to come," Helena said, understanding. "No. She wanted to stay in Missouri, near her family, living the same life her parents and grandparents had lived. There is nothing wrong with that, but it was not what I wanted. We argued for months, both of us trying to convince the other to change their minds. In the end, she married my brother instead." He picked up the hammer again, turning it over in his hands. "That was hard, knowing that she could replace me that easily, that her love had conditions I could not meet." "I am sorry," Helena said, meaning it. "It was a long time ago." I made peace with it." Caleb looked at her, his expression serious. "But it taught me what it feels like when the future you thought you had disappears, when you have to figure out who you are and what you want when everything has changed. It is not the same as what you are going through, Mrs. Foster, but I understand that feeling of being lost." Helena felt something shift inside her, some of the walls she had built around herself cracking just slightly. Caleb was not just some do-gooder neighbor feeling obligated to help the poor widow. He was someone who had experienced his own losses, his own grief, and had somehow found his way through it. That understanding mattered in a way Helena had not expected. "You can call me Helena," she said quietly. "Mrs. Foster sounds so formal for someone who is rebuilding my porch." Caleb smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger. "Helena it is, then, and please call me Caleb." They finished the porch as the sun began to set, and when Caleb left that evening, Helena stood on her newly reinforced porch and watched him ride away. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something other than grief. She felt the faintest stirring of hope, barely there but present nonetheless, like the first green shoot pushing through frozen ground. The summer progressed, and Caleb continued to come to Helena's homestead several times a week. He helped her with the endless work that came with maintaining a property, fixing what was broken, reinforcing what was weak, preparing for the harsher weather that would come with autumn. Helena found herself looking forward to his visits, found herself making extra coffee in the mornings and baking bread to share with him at midday. They talked while they worked, sharing stories about their lives, their dreams, their disappointments. Helena told Caleb about growing up in San Francisco before her parents moved to Angels Camp searching for gold, about how her father had died in a mining accident, and her mother had followed him into the grave 6 months later from a broken heart and pneumonia. She told him about meeting Thomas at a church social, about how he had been kind and steady, offering her stability when she had none. "Did you love him?" Caleb asked one day as they mended a gate together. Helena considered the question carefully. "I cared for him deeply. He was good to me, and we were building a good life together. But I am not sure I knew what love really was when I married him. I needed someone and he needed someone, and that seemed like enough." She paused, surprised by her own honesty. "That sounds terrible, does it not?" "No," Caleb said. "It sounds human. A lot of marriages out here start that way. People need partners to survive, and sometimes love comes later and sometimes it does not. That does not make what you had less valuable." "I miss him," Helena said, and it was true. She missed Thomas's presence, his steady reliability, the way he hummed while he worked. "But I think I miss the future we were supposed to have more than I miss who he was. Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you honest," Caleb replied. "Grief is complicated, Helena. There is no right or wrong way to feel it." As the weeks turned into months, Helena began to notice changes in herself. The hollow emptiness inside her was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. She found herself smiling occasionally, laughing at something Caleb said. She started taking pride in her appearance again, wearing her better dresses instead of just her work clothes, fixing her hair in the mornings. She began to make plans for the future, thinking about what crops to plant in the fall, whether she should get more chickens, how to better use her land. She also began to notice Caleb in ways that had nothing to do with his helpfulness. She noticed the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he lifted something heavy, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he listened to her with complete attention, as if nothing else in the world mattered. She noticed how her heart beat a little faster when she heard his horse approaching, how the days he did not come felt longer and emptier. This realization terrified her. It had only been a few months since Thomas's death. What kind of woman started having feelings for another man so soon after burying her husband? The guilt was crushing, warring with the growing affection she felt for Caleb. She tried to push her feelings down, tried to maintain distance, but it was increasingly difficult when Caleb was so present in her life, so essential to her daily existence. In August, a traveling merchant came through Angel's Camp selling goods, and Helena needed fabric to make new curtains for her house. The old ones were falling apart, and she had saved enough money from selling eggs in town to afford something nice. She went into Angel's Camp on a Saturday, grateful for the distraction. The town was busy that day, full of miners and ranchers and families doing their weekly shopping. Helena purchased her fabric and was preparing to head home when she overheard two women talking outside the general store. "Did you see Caleb Jensen with that widow woman again?" one of them said, her voice carrying. "He is over at her place near every day from what I hear." "Scandalous," the other woman replied with obvious relish. "Her husband barely cold in the ground, and she has already got her hooks in the richest rancher in the county. Smart woman, if you ask me, but shameless." Helena felt her face flush hot with shame and anger. She hurried to her horse, desperate to escape before the women saw her, but their words followed her all the way home. Was that what people thought? That she was deliberately trying to trap Caleb, using him for his money and resources? The thought made her sick. When Caleb came by the next day to help her repair a water trough, Helena was distant and cold. She barely spoke to him, answered his questions with one-word responses, and refused to look at him directly. Caleb bore this treatment patiently for about an hour before he finally set down his tools and confronted her. "What is wrong, Helena? Did I do something to offend you?" "No," Helena said shortly. "Then why are you acting like you can barely stand to be in my presence?" "Maybe you should not be in my presence so often," Helena snapped, all her fear and guilt and confusion boiling over. "Maybe you should stop coming here." Caleb looked like she had struck him. "Why would I do that?" "Because people are talking, Caleb. They think that I am using you, that I am trying to trap you into marriage for your money. They think I am shameless for having a man around so soon after Thomas's death." Tears burned in Helena's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "And maybe they are right. Maybe this is wrong. Maybe you should just go and leave me alone." "Is that what you want?" Caleb asked quietly. "For me to leave you alone?" "I do not know what I want," Helena said, her voice breaking. "I do not know anything anymore. All I know is that I am so tired of feeling guilty all the time. I feel guilty for grieving Thomas, guilty for not grieving him enough, guilty for being happy when you are here, guilty for wanting you to be here. I just want to stop feeling guilty." Caleb crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides and took her hands in his. "Helena, look at me." When she finally met his eyes, he continued, "I do not give a damn what people in town say about us. They can talk all they want. All that matters is what you want and what I want, and I want to be here. I want to help you. I want to spend time with you. I have wanted that since the first time I saw you standing at Thomas's grave looking like the saddest thing I had ever seen." "Caleb," Helena whispered, overwhelmed. "I am not asking anything from you that you are not ready to give," he said earnestly. "If all you want from me is friendship and help with your property, then that is what you will get. But if you want more than that, if you feel even a fraction of what I feel when I am with you, then I need you to know that I am here. I will wait however long it takes. What do you feel?" Helena asked, her heart pounding. "I am falling in love with you," Caleb said simply. "I have been falling in love with you all summer, watching you pull yourself out of grief, watching you become yourself again. You are strong and brave and beautiful, and every day I come here, I fall a little bit more." Helena's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with such raw honesty and vulnerability. Thomas had been a good man, but he had never been particularly romantic or expressive. Caleb's words felt like water on parched earth, like something she did not know she had been dying for. "I think I have feelings for you too," she admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush. "But I am scared, Caleb. I am scared of being hurt again, scared of what people will say, scared that I do not know how to love anyone properly because I do not think I ever really learned how." "Then we will figure it out together," Caleb said, squeezing her hands gently. "We do not have to rush anything. We do not have to explain ourselves to anyone. We can just be, Helena. Just take it one day at a time and see where it leads us." Helena felt tears spill down her cheeks, but for once they were not tears of grief. They were tears of relief, of hope, of something that felt dangerously close to happiness. "One day at a time," she repeated. Caleb reached up and wiped her tears away with his thumbs, his touch infinitely gentle. "One day at a time," he confirmed. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, looking at each other with new understanding. Then Caleb stepped back, picked up his tools, and returned to working on the water trough as if nothing monumental had just occurred. But everything had changed, and they both knew it. After that day, their relationship shifted into something new. They were still friends, still worked together on her property, but there was an undercurrent of awareness now, an acknowledgement of the feelings growing between them. Caleb was careful not to push, never demanding more than Helena was ready to give. He did not try to kiss her or hold her beyond the occasional touch of hands. He simply continued to show up, continued to be present, continued to prove with actions rather than words that he was serious about his intentions. Helena found herself opening up in ways she never had before. She told Caleb about her fears and insecurities, about feeling like she was not enough, about worrying that she was somehow cursed to lose everyone she cared about. Caleb listened to all of it without judgment, offering comfort when she needed it and honest perspective when she needed that instead. "You are not cursed," he told her one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "Terrible things happen sometimes, Helena. That is just part of being alive. But so are good things if you let yourself be open to them." "I am trying to be open," Helena said. "It is just hard. It feels like if I let myself be happy, I am somehow betraying Thomas's memory." "Do you think Thomas would want you to be miserable for the rest of your life?" "No," Helena admitted. "He was a kind man. He would want me to be happy." "Then let yourself be happy," Caleb said gently. "You deserve that, Helena. You deserve to have a full life, to love and be loved, to have joy. That is not betraying anyone. That is just being human." His words sank into Helena's heart, taking root there. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that she could have a future that included happiness and love. Slowly, carefully, she began to let herself believe it. In September, a fierce storm rolled through the area, bringing driving rain and howling winds. Helena woke in the middle of the night to find water leaking through her roof in several places. She spent hours trying to catch the drips in buckets and pans, but by morning, her house was a mess, and she was exhausted and frustrated. Caleb arrived just after dawn, soaked to the skin and leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. "I figured you might have roof damage," he said by way of greeting. "Half the ranches in the area got hit. I brought tar paper and shingles." "You should take care of your own property first," Helena protested, even as relief flooded through her at seeing him. "Already did. My place is secure. Now let me help you with yours." They worked all day in the rain, Caleb up on the roof patching holes while Helena handed up supplies and tried to keep everything as dry as possible. By the time evening came, they were both drenched and covered in tar, but the roof was fixed and the house was secure. Helena insisted Caleb stay for dinner since it was too late and too wet for him to ride home safely. She made stew from vegetables in her garden and bread she had baked that morning. They ate by lamplight, still damp from the rain, and talked about nothing important. But there was an intimacy to the moment, a domesticity that made Helena's heart ache with longing. After dinner, Caleb stood to leave, but Helena caught his hand. "Stay," she said quietly. Caleb went very still. "Helena, I do not want you to feel pressured." "I do not feel pressured," Helena interrupted. "I just do not want you riding home in the dark and rain. You can sleep on the settee, please." Relief and something deeper crossed Caleb's face. "All right, if you are sure." Helena found blankets and a pillow, made up the settee for Caleb, then retreated to her bedroom. But she found she could not sleep, too aware of Caleb's presence in the next room. After an hour of tossing and turning, she got up and went back to the main room. Caleb was still awake, lying on the settee and staring at the ceiling. He sat up when Helena appeared. "Is everything all right?" "I cannot sleep," Helena said. She sat down on the chair across from him, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Caleb, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why me? You could have any woman you wanted. You are successful, kind, handsome. Why are you wasting your time on a broken widow who does not know if she will ever be whole again?" Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression intense. "You are not broken, Helena. You are healing, and that is different. And I am not wasting my time because being with you does not feel like wasted time. It feels like the most important thing I have ever done." "But why?" "Because when I am with you, I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be," Caleb said simply. "Because you make me laugh, because you challenge me, because you are honest even when it is hard, because you keep getting up every day and trying even when it would be easier to give up. Because I look at you and I see someone worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth everything." Helena felt her eyes fill with tears. "I do not know if I can be what you need." "You already are," Caleb said. "You do not have to be anything other than who you are, Helena. That is enough. You are enough." Something inside Helena broke open at those words, some last wall of defense crumbling. She stood up, crossed to the settee, and before she could talk herself out of it, she kissed Caleb. He made a surprised sound, then his arms came around her and he was kissing her back, soft and sweet and careful, like she was something precious. When they finally broke apart, Helena was shaking. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know," Caleb said, his forehead resting against hers. "But you do not have to be scared alone anymore. I am here, Helena. I am not going anywhere." Helena kissed him again, pouring all her fear and hope and tentative love into it. Caleb responded in kind, his hands gentle as they cradled her face. They stayed like that for a long time, trading kisses that were more about comfort and connection than passion. When Helena finally pulled away, she felt lighter somehow, as if acknowledging her feelings had lifted a weight she had been carrying. "I should go back to bed," she said reluctantly. "Probably," Caleb agreed, though he made no move to let her go. Helena smiled, surprising herself. "Will you still be here in the morning?" "I will be here every morning you want me here," Caleb promised. Helena went back to her bedroom and this time fell asleep almost immediately, the sound of rain on the roof comforting rather than frightening. When she woke in the morning, Caleb was already up, making coffee in her kitchen as if he belonged there. He looked up when she emerged and smiled, and Helena felt her heart skip. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Helena replied, unable to keep the smile off her own face. They had breakfast together, and then Caleb prepared to head back to his ranch. Before he left, he took Helena's hands in his. "I need to be at my place for the next few days handling some business with a cattle buyer, but I will be back as soon as I can. Will you be all right?" "I will be fine," Helena assured him. "I managed before you came along, remember?" "I remember. But I like taking care of you if you will let me." "I will let you," Helena said softly. Then, gathering her courage, she added, "Because I am falling in love with you too, Caleb Jensen." The joy that lit up Caleb's face was worth every moment of fear and doubt Helena had experienced. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, and Helena let herself be held, let herself feel safe and cherished and loved. When he finally rode away, she stood on her porch and watched until he was out of sight, her hand pressed to her heart. The next few days were busy for Helena. She threw herself into preserving vegetables from her garden for the winter, pickling cucumbers and canning tomatoes and drying herbs. She cleaned her house from top to bottom, scrubbing away the dust and cobwebs that had accumulated during her months of grief. She even went into town and bought fabric to make a new dress, something pretty and feminine, not mourning black. The women in town definitely noticed the change in her. Helena could feel their curious stares, hear their whispered speculation. But she found that she did not care as much as she had before. Caleb was right. What they thought did not matter. All that mattered was what she wanted, and what she wanted was to build a life that included joy and hope and love. Caleb returned 3 days later, and Helena greeted him wearing her new dress, a soft blue that matched the California sky. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you," Helena said, blushing. "I thought it was time to stop wearing mourning clothes. Thomas would not want me to live in darkness forever." "No, he would not," Caleb agreed. He dismounted and walked toward her, and Helena met him halfway. They stood close, not quite touching, but the air between them charged with electricity. "I missed you," Helena admitted. "I missed you too. Every moment I was gone, I wanted to be back here with you." Caleb reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Helena, I know this is fast, and I know you might not be ready, but I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I love you," Caleb said, his gray eyes intense. "Not falling, not almost. I love you completely and fully." "You do not have to say it back if you are not ready. I just needed you to know." Helena's heart felt too big for her chest. "I love you too," she said, and saying the words out loud felt like stepping off a cliff and discovering she could fly. "I love you, Caleb, and that terrifies me, but it also makes me happier than I have been in longer than I can remember." Caleb swept her up into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her properly for the first time, deep and passionate and full of promise. Helena kissed him back with everything she had, no longer holding any part of herself in reserve. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is too soon, I know people will talk, but I do not care. Marry me, Helena. Let me spend the rest of my life loving you." Helena's first instinct was to say yes immediately, but old fears rose up. "Caleb, it has only been 6 months since Thomas died. People will be scandalized. Let them be scandalized. This is our life, not theirs. But what if something happens? What if I lose you too? I do not think I could survive that again." Caleb cupped her face in his hands, his expression serious. "I cannot promise you that nothing bad will ever happen, Helena. Life does not work that way. But I can promise you that I will do everything in my power to come home to you every single day. I can promise you that I will love you with everything I have for as long as I live. And I can promise you that even if the worst happens, you will survive it because you are the strongest person I know." "I do not feel strong," Helena whispered. "But you are. You survived losing your parents, losing Thomas, losing your sense of purpose and hope. And you are still here, still standing, still willing to open your heart again despite everything. That is the definition of strength, Helena." Helena thought about what Caleb was offering: a life together, a partnership built on love and respect and genuine affection. A chance to have the family she had always wanted, to build something meaningful with someone who truly saw her and valued her. It was everything she had wanted with Thomas, but had never quite had, everything she had stopped believing she deserved. "Yes," she said, the word coming out strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you, Caleb Jensen." Caleb's whoop of joy could probably be heard all the way in Angel's camp. He picked Helena up and spun her around again, then kissed her until they were both dizzy. When they finally came up for air, they were both grinning like fools. When Caleb asked, "How soon can we do this?" Helena laughed at his eagerness. "We should wait at least a little while for propriety's sake, maybe after Christmas. That will be 9 months after Thomas's death. It still will not be the full year of mourning that is traditional, but it is better than rushing to the altar." "After Christmas," Caleb agreed, though he looked like he wanted to argue for sooner. "But you are moving in with me at my ranch before then." "I am not leaving you out here alone for another 4 months. Caleb, that would be completely improper. We are not married yet. Then we will get one of my ranch hands to move into the bunkhouse, and you can have his room in the main house." "Separate rooms, completely respectable, but at least you will be safe and cared for. This property is too isolated, Helena, and you should not be managing it alone, even with my help." Helena wanted to argue, but she also knew he was right. The homestead was isolated, and while she had managed so far, it was a struggle. The idea of living at Caleb's ranch, of having help and company and safety, was appealing. "What about this property?" she asked. "I cannot just abandon it." "We will find someone to lease it, someone who will work the land and pay you rent, or we can sell it if you prefer. Whatever you want to do, we will figure it out together." The idea that she did not have to make all the decisions alone, that she had a partner to help her navigate the practical realities of life, was such a relief that Helena almost cried. "All right," she agreed. "I will move to your ranch, but separate rooms until we are married." "Separate rooms," Caleb promised, though the heat in his eyes suggested that the waiting would not be easy for either of them. They spent the rest of the day making plans, talking about the wedding, about combining their properties, about what their future would look like. By the time evening came, Helena felt more hopeful about the future than she had in years. Not just since Thomas's death, but even before that. This felt different, bigger, more real. Over the next few weeks, Helena prepared to move to Caleb's ranch. She sorted through her belongings, deciding what to bring and what to leave behind. Caleb helped her lease her homestead to a young couple new to Angel's camp, a miner and his wife looking for a place to start a family. Seeing someone else move into the house she had shared with Thomas was harder than Helena expected, but it also felt right, like closing one chapter so another could begin. Moving to Caleb's ranch was a revelation. His property was substantially larger than her homestead had been, with a sturdy 2-story house, a large barn, several outbuildings, and acres of prime grazing land. His 2 ranch hands, a father and son team named Pete and Johnny, were friendly and welcoming. Pete, the father, moved into the bunkhouse without complaint, giving Helena his room on the 2nd floor of the main house, well away from Caleb's room downstairs. Life at the ranch was busy but good. Helena helped with cooking and cleaning, tended a much larger vegetable garden than she had managed at her homestead, and learned about cattle ranching from Caleb and his hands. She had always been a quick learner, and she found the work satisfying. More than that, she loved the sense of partnership, of working alongside Caleb toward common goals. They were careful to maintain propriety, never alone in the house with the door closed, never touching more than was appropriate for an engaged couple. But the tension between them grew as the weeks passed, the desire for more becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Stolen kisses in the barn, heated looks across the dinner table, hands that lingered a moment too long when passing tools or plates. By the time November arrived, both of them were counting down the days until their wedding. They had decided to marry the week after Christmas, giving them a little time to prepare but not dragging things out unnecessarily. Helena sewed her wedding dress herself, a simple but elegant creation in cream-colored silk that Caleb had insisted on buying for her in Sacramento. She also spent time getting to know Caleb's neighbors, establishing herself as part of the ranching community around Angel's Camp. Some people in town still gossiped, still whispered about the impropriety of Helena remarrying so quickly, but most people were kind. They could see how happy Helena and Caleb were together, could see that this was a genuine love match, not a marriage of convenience. The preacher who would marry them, Reverend Matthews, was particularly supportive. "I have known Caleb Jensen for 7 years," he told Helena when they met to discuss the ceremony. "He is one of the finest men I have ever met, honest and hardworking and deeply faithful. If he loves you enough to marry you, then you must be a remarkable woman. Do not let small-minded gossip steal your joy." His words meant more to Helena than she could express. She had worried that the church would judge her harshly, but instead she found acceptance and support. Christmas of 1873 was the happiest Helena had been in years. Caleb gave her a beautiful necklace with a small sapphire pendant, and she gave him a pocket watch she had saved for months to buy. They spent the day with Pete and Johnny, sharing a feast Helena had spent days preparing. The mood was festive and warm, and Helena felt surrounded by family even though none of them were related by blood. "This is what I have always wanted," she told Caleb that night as they sat by the fire after the others had gone to bed. "A home full of love and laughter and people who care about each other. You have it now," Caleb said, taking her hand. "And in 3 days it will be official. You will be my wife, Helena, and I will be the luckiest man alive." "I am the lucky one," Helena said softly. "You saved me, Caleb. When I was drowning in grief and could not find my way back, you threw me a rope and pulled me to shore. You loved me when I was too broken to love myself. I will never forget that." "You saved yourself," Caleb corrected gently. "I just reminded you that you could. You did the hard work of healing, of choosing to keep going, of opening your heart again despite everything. That was all you, Helena." Their wedding day dawned clear and cold, the California winter mild but crisp. Helena dressed in her cream silk gown with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear but from excitement. She was really doing this, really marrying Caleb, really starting a new life. It felt surreal and wonderful all at once. The ceremony took place at the small church in Angel's Camp, with Pete and Johnny and a handful of friends in attendance. Helena had no family to invite, and Caleb's family was too far away in Missouri to make the journey, but the people who were there were the ones who mattered. They had supported Helena and Caleb through everything, and their presence made the day perfect. When Helena walked down the aisle and saw Caleb waiting for her at the altar, her breath caught. He looked impossibly handsome in his best suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his gray eyes shining with love and barely contained emotion. When she reached him and took his hands, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her, a certainty that this was exactly where she was supposed to be. Reverend Matthews performed a beautiful ceremony, speaking about love and commitment and the courage it takes to open your heart after loss. When it came time for vows, Caleb spoke first. "Helena, I vow to love you for the rest of my life, to support you in all things, to be your partner and friend and husband. I vow to never let you face hardship alone, to always be honest with you even when it is difficult, and to build a life with you that is full of joy and purpose. You are my heart, and I will treasure you always." Helena's turn came, and she had to blink back tears to speak. "Caleb, I vow to love you with everything I have, to trust you with my heart even though that terrifies me, to build a home and family with you that honors the love we share. You taught me that I could be strong, that I could heal, that I could believe in happiness again. I vow to spend the rest of my life being worthy of the love you have given me." "You are already worthy," Caleb whispered, though it was not part of the ceremony. Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, and when Caleb kissed Helena, she felt like she was flying. This was nothing like her first wedding to Thomas, which had been pleasant but lacking in passion. This was fire and joy and perfect certainty. This was right. They held a small reception at the ranch, with food and dancing and celebration that lasted well into the night. When everyone finally left, and it was just Helena and Caleb alone in their home for the first time as husband and wife, the reality of what they had done settled over them. "Are you happy?" Caleb asked, pulling Helena into his arms. "I am happier than I ever thought possible," Helena said honestly. "Are you?" Deliriously, Caleb said, then he kissed her properly, without any need for restraint now that they were married. Helena kissed him back with all the pent-up longing of the past months, and when Caleb lifted her in his arms and carried her to their bedroom, she went willingly, eagerly, ready to start this new chapter of her life with the man she loved. Their wedding night was everything Helena had hoped it would be. Caleb was tender and patient, taking his time, making sure Helena felt safe and cherished. It was so different from her experiences with Thomas, who had been perfunctory and quick in their intimate moments. With Caleb, it was about connection and pleasure and expressing with their bodies what words could not adequately convey. Helena felt truly seen and loved for the first time in her life. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their bed, talking quietly in the darkness. "You want children?" Caleb asked, his hand resting on Helena's stomach. "Very much," Helena said. "Do you?" "I want a whole houseful," Caleb admitted. "I want sons to teach about ranching and daughters to spoil rotten. I want to build a legacy, something that lasts beyond just us." "Then we will make that happen," Helena promised. "We have time." "We have all the time in the world," Caleb agreed, pulling her closer. "The rest of our lives together." Helena fell asleep that night feeling completely at peace, her head on Caleb's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. For the first time since Thomas's death, the future stretched before her full of possibility instead of emptiness. She had believed she was too broken to ever love again, but Caleb had proven her wrong. He had loved her patiently and persistently until she remembered how to love herself, how to believe in happiness, how to hope. The months that followed their wedding were busy and productive. Helena threw herself into being a rancher's wife, learning everything she could about the business. She had always been practical and intelligent, and she quickly became an invaluable partner to Caleb. She managed the books, handled correspondence with buyers, and even helped with the cattle when extra hands were needed. Caleb was constantly amazed by her competence and dedication. "You are better at this than I am," he told her one evening as she explained a more efficient system she had developed for tracking their inventory. "I am organized, that is all," Helena said modestly. "You are the one with the vision and skill to make the ranch work." "We make a good team," Caleb said, pulling her into his lap. "The best team," Helena agreed, kissing him. In March of 1874, just a few months after their wedding, Helena discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified and thrilled in equal measure, afraid of all the things that could go wrong but desperately wanting this baby. When she told Caleb, he was over the moon with joy. "We are going to be parents," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "Helena, we are going to have a baby." "I know," Helena said, laughing at his enthusiasm. "Are you ready for this?" "I have been ready for this my whole life," Caleb said seriously. "But more than that, I am ready to do this with you. You are going to be an amazing mother, Helena." The pregnancy was not easy. Helena suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and she was exhausted all the time. But Caleb took wonderful care of her, making sure she rested, bringing her tea and dry toast when she felt ill, rubbing her feet when they swelled. His attentiveness and care made Helena fall even more in love with him, if that was possible. As her belly grew, so did their excitement. They prepared a nursery in one of the spare bedrooms, painting and furnishing it together. Helena sewed baby clothes and blankets, and Caleb built a beautiful cradle from oak wood. They talked endlessly about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the life they would give their child. "I want our children to know they are loved," Helena said one evening as she sat knitting booties. "I want them to always feel safe and valued." "They will," Caleb promised. "We will make sure of it." In late October, just as autumn was painting the California hills in shades of gold and red, Helena went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Caleb stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. The doctor they had brought from Angel's Camp praised Helena's strength, saying he had rarely seen a woman so determined. When their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, both Helena and Caleb wept with joy and relief. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair like his father and a strong set of lungs that suggested he would be a force to be reckoned with. "What should we name him?" Helena asked, exhausted but glowing as she held their son. "I was thinking about Thomas," Caleb said carefully. "To honor your first husband, if you would like that." Helena looked at Caleb with tears in her eyes. The fact that he would suggest naming their son after Thomas, that he would want to honor that part of her past, meant everything to her. "Thomas Caleb Jensen," she said. "Tom for short." "Perfect," Caleb said, kissing her forehead and then the baby's. "He is absolutely perfect." Tom was a colicky baby, crying frequently and sleeping poorly, but Helena and Caleb handled it with patience and teamwork. They took turns walking him at night, soothing him when he fussed, marveling at every tiny milestone. Parenthood was exhausting and challenging, but it was also the most rewarding thing either of them had ever done. As Tom grew from an infant into a toddler, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the summer of 1876 they welcomed a daughter they named Margaret Rose, Maggie for short. Then came another son in 1878, James, and finally another daughter in 1880, Catherine, who they called Kate. The ranch house that had once felt so large and empty was now filled with noise and chaos and life. Children ran through the halls, played in the barn, helped with age-appropriate chores. Helena and Caleb's love deepened with each passing year, strengthened by the family they built together and the life they shared. They had their challenges, of course. There were lean years when cattle prices dropped, harsh winters that tested their resources, illnesses and injuries that frightened them. But they faced everything together, their partnership unshakable. Helena often thought back to that broken woman standing at Thomas's grave in 1873 and marveled at how far she had come. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised Helena with a trip to San Francisco, their first time away from the ranch since the children had been born. Pete and Johnny, now trusted friends as much as employees, agreed to watch the children for a few days. Helena was nervous about leaving them but also excited to have time alone with Caleb. They stayed at a beautiful hotel, ate at fancy restaurants, walked along the waterfront, and simply enjoyed being together without the constant demands of children and ranch work. On their last night in the city, as they stood on their hotel balcony looking out at the lights, Caleb pulled Helena close. "You remember the first time I saw you?" he asked. "At Thomas's funeral," Helena said. "You looked so lost, so completely shattered. I wanted to help you so badly, but I did not know how. I just knew I could not walk away and leave you alone." "I am glad you did not walk away," Helena said softly. "I was too broken to see it then, but you were exactly what I needed. You did not try to fix me or rush me. You just loved me patiently until I remembered how to live again." "You were never broken," Caleb said, turning her to face him. "You were grieving, and that is different. But even in your grief, I could see your strength, your resilience. I fell in love with that strength, Helena. I fell in love with your courage to keep going when everything felt impossible." "I love you," Helena said, emotion thick in her voice. "I love Thomas, but what I feel for you is deeper and truer than anything I have ever known. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. Thank you for not giving up on me when I had given up on myself." "I will never give up on you," Caleb promised. "Not in this lifetime." They returned home to chaos, as Tom had apparently decided to try to ride one of the calves and had given everyone heart failure, and Maggie had convinced Kate that they should paint the barn door with mud, but Helena found herself smiling through the insanity. This was her life, messy and loud and imperfect and absolutely wonderful. The years continued to pass, bringing more changes and challenges. The children grew, each developing their own distinct personalities. Tom was serious and responsible, already showing an interest in taking over the ranch someday. Maggie was fierce and independent, more interested in books and learning than domestic pursuits. James was adventurous and always looking for trouble, keeping Helena constantly on her toes. Kate was gentle and empathetic, with a gift for healing injured animals. Helena and Caleb worked hard to give their children the stable, loving home neither of them had fully experienced in their own childhoods. They taught them about hard work and integrity, about treating others with kindness and respect, about standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. They also made sure their children knew they were loved unconditionally, that their home was a safe place where they could always turn. In 1885, 12 years after Helena and Caleb's wedding, Angel's Camp had grown substantially. The mining industry had stabilized, and the town had become a proper community with schools, churches, businesses, and civic organizations. Helena had become deeply involved in the community, helping to establish a library and organize aid for families in need. Caleb served on the town council, using his success and influence to improve life for everyone in the area. One spring afternoon, Helena was working in her garden when a young woman approached the ranch. She was thin and pale, with haunted eyes that reminded Helena painfully of herself years earlier. The woman introduced herself as Sarah, and she explained that she was newly widowed, her husband killed in a mining accident. She had no family, no means of support, and she had heard that the Jensen ranch sometimes hired extra help. Helena saw herself in Sarah's desperate eyes, saw the same brokenness and fear she had once felt. Without hesitation, she offered Sarah a position helping with housework and child care, along with a room and meals. Caleb supported the decision completely, just as Helena had known he would. Over the following months, Helena watched Sarah slowly heal, much as she herself had healed years before. She encouraged Sarah, gave her space to grieve, but also gently pushed her to keep living. It was like looking at her younger self in a mirror, and Helena was grateful for the opportunity to give back some of the kindness that had been shown to her. "You have a gift for helping wounded souls," Caleb told Helena one evening as they watched Sarah playing with Kate in the yard. "I just understand what it is like to feel like your world has ended," Helena said. "And I understand how much it means when someone refuses to let you disappear into that darkness. You did that for me, Caleb. I am just passing it forward." "You are an extraordinary woman, Helena Jensen," Caleb said, pulling her close. "Have I told you that lately?" "Not since this morning," Helena teased, but her heart swelled with love. Time continued its steady march forward. Tom grew into a young man and began courting a local rancher's daughter. Maggie announced her intention to become a teacher, much to her parents' pride. James joined his father and brother in running the ranch, while Kate began apprenticing with the town doctor, discovering a passion for medicine. Helena and Caleb aged gracefully together, their hair graying, their faces lining, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They celebrated 20 years of marriage in 1893 with a large party attended by friends and neighbors from all over the county. Their 4 children organized the whole thing, decorating the barn, arranging for food and music, and gathering testimonials from people whose lives Helena and Caleb had touched over the years. "I cannot believe it has been 20 years, Helena said, as she and Caleb danced together to fiddle music. "It feels like we just got married yesterday, but also like we have been together forever." "Time is strange that way," Caleb agreed, "but I would not change a single moment." "Well, maybe that time James broke his arm trying to jump off the barn roof. I could have done without that." Helena laughed, remembering the terror of that day. "He got his adventurous spirit from you, you know." "I was never that reckless," Caleb protested. "You rode through a lightning storm to check on me once. That was different. That was love making me reckless, not youthful stupidity." They danced and laughed and celebrated, surrounded by the family and community they had built together. As the evening wore on and Helena looked around at all the people gathered in their barn, all the lives that had been touched by their love story, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she said to Caleb as they stood together watching their children dance. "For what? For everything. For seeing past my brokenness to the person I could be again. For loving me patiently when I did not know how to love myself. For building this life with me, this family, this home. For giving me more happiness than I ever thought possible." Caleb took her hand and brought it to his lips. "You gave me just as much, Helena. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions of life but not really living. You gave me purpose and meaning and a reason to be grateful for every single day. You are my everything." As the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Helena reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been a widow, broken and lost, unable to imagine a future that held anything but grief. But then Caleb had walked into her life and refused to let her stay lost. He had loved her with patience and persistence, had believed in her when she could not believe in herself, had given her space to heal while also giving her a reason to want to heal. She had loved Thomas, but what she shared with Caleb was something deeper and truer. It was a partnership built on genuine compatibility, mutual respect, passionate love, and shared dreams. Together they had built a life that was rich and full, filled with children and friends and purpose. They had created a legacy that would outlast them, a family that would carry their values forward into future generations. Helena was 45 years old now, no longer the young widow standing at a grave. She was a wife, a mother, a rancher, a community leader. She was strong and capable and deeply, genuinely happy. The hollow emptiness that had consumed her after Thomas's death was long gone, filled with love and joy and satisfaction. You ever think about how different your life would be if I had not stopped to help you that day at the cemetery? Caleb asked, as if reading her thoughts. Sometimes, Helena admitted. I think I would have eventually figured things out. I am too stubborn to have given up completely. But it would have been so much harder, and I would have missed out on this, on us, on our family, on all the happiness we have shared. I think about it too, Caleb said. I think about how easily I could have just ridden past, assumed someone else would help you. But something told me to stop, to reach out, to not let you be alone. I think it was fate, Helena. I think we were always meant to find each other. I think so too, Helena said, leaning against her husband's solid strength. I think everything I went through, all the pain and loss, was leading me to you, to this life we built together. As the party continued around them, as their children laughed and danced, as friends celebrated their love, Helena closed her eyes and sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. She was grateful for Thomas, for the lessons that marriage had taught her. She was grateful for the grief that had broken her open, because it had also made space for something new and beautiful to grow. But most of all, she was grateful for Caleb, for his stubborn refusal to let her stay broken, for his patient, persistent love that had shown her she was worth loving. The widow who had been too broken to love had learned to love again, deeper and truer than before. And the rancher who had loved her until she believed again had been rewarded with a love that would last a lifetime. Together they had proven that even the most shattered hearts can heal, that hope can grow from despair, and that love, true love, can overcome anything. The years that followed brought both joy and sorrow, as all lives do. There were grandchildren to delight in, watching Tom and his wife welcome 3 children of their own. There were challenges with Maggie's choice to remain unmarried and focus on her teaching career, though Helena and Caleb supported her decision completely, proud of her independence. James eventually settled down with a widow from a neighboring town, and they blended their families together beautifully. Kate married the young doctor she had apprenticed with, and together they opened a practice in Angel's Camp that served the entire community. Helena and Caleb aged together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated 30 years of marriage, then 40. Their ranch continued to prosper, eventually being passed down to Tom and James, who ran it together as equal partners, just as their parents had always done everything together. When Helena was 68 years old, Caleb fell ill with pneumonia. It was winter, and despite the doctor's best efforts and Kate's devoted care, he grew steadily weaker. Helena stayed by his side constantly, holding his hand, talking to him about their life together, thanking him for every moment they had shared. "I am not ready to let you go," she whispered one night as his breathing grew labored. "I know," Caleb said weakly. "But Helena, you have to promise me something, anything. Promise me you will not break again. Promise me you will remember that you are strong, that you can survive anything. Promise me you will keep living, really living, not just existing." Tears streamed down Helena's face. "I cannot imagine life without you. You do not have to imagine it yet. I am still here." Caleb squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. "But when the time comes, and it will come eventually, I need to know that you will be all right, that you will let our children and grandchildren take care of you the way you took care of Sarah and so many others over the years." "I promise," Helena said, though the words broke her heart. "But you have to fight, Caleb. You have to try to get better." "I am trying, my love. But if I cannot win this fight, I need you to know that every single day I spent with you was a gift. You made my life worth living, Helena. You gave me everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed of. I love you with everything I am, and I will love you beyond death. I love you too, Helena sobbed. I will always love you. Caleb passed away 3 days later, surrounded by his wife and children. It was peaceful in the end, his suffering finally over. Helena held him as he took his last breath, and though her heart shattered all over again, she did not break. She grieved deeply and truly, mourned the man who had been her partner and love for 42 years. But she did not lose herself in that grief the way she had when Thomas died. She had promised Caleb she would be strong, and she kept that promise. She leaned on her children and grandchildren, let them support her through the worst of her grief. She continued to be active in the community, continued to help others, continued to live rather than just exist. She told stories about Caleb to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive and vibrant. On what would have been their 43rd wedding anniversary, Helena sat on the porch of the ranch house she and Caleb had shared, watching the sun set over the California hills. Tom sat beside her, graying now himself, his own children grown. "Are you all right, Mama?" he asked gently. "I am sad," Helena said honestly. "I miss your father every single day, but I am also grateful, Tom. I am grateful for every moment we had together, every laugh, every challenge we overcame, every milestone we celebrated. Your father taught me that love is worth the risk of loss, that opening your heart even when you are terrified is the bravest thing you can do." "He loved you so much," Tom said. "And I loved him. I still love him, even though he is gone. That love does not end just because someone dies. It transforms, but it remains." Helena smiled slightly, thinking of the young widow she had once been. "When your father first came into my life, I was completely broken. I had given up on everything, but he refused to let me stay in that darkness. He loved me patiently and persistently until I remembered that I was worth loving. He saved my life, Tom, not by fixing me, but by believing I could fix myself." "You saved each other," Tom said wisely. "He told me once that before you, he was just going through the motions of living. You gave him purpose and joy." "We were lucky to find each other," Helena agreed. "And I am lucky to have had him for as long as I did. Some people never experience love like that, not even once. I was blessed to have it for 42 years. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. Stars began to appear, and Helena found herself thinking about all the evenings she and Caleb had sat on this very porch, planning their future, dreaming their dreams, simply being together. Helena lived for another 7 years after Caleb's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She remained active and engaged, a beloved matriarch who dispensed wisdom and love in equal measure. She told the story of her and Caleb's love often, wanting future generations to understand that true love requires courage, that healing is possible even after devastating loss, and that sometimes the greatest loves come when you least expect them. When Helena finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75, her family gathered to celebrate her life. They told stories about her strength and resilience, about how she had survived loss and found love again, about how she had built a family and legacy that would endure for generations. She was buried next to Caleb on the hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the vast California sky they had both loved. Her headstone reads simply, "Helena Foster Jensen, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She believed in love even when it seemed impossible." The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations of Jensens who carried forward the values Helena and Caleb had instilled. The story of the widow who was too broken to love and the rancher who loved her until she believed again became family legend. told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. A reminder that love can heal the deepest wounds, and that believing in second chances can lead to extraordinary happiness. In Angel's Camp, California, where gold had once drawn thousands seeking fortune, the greatest treasure turned out to be the love between two people who refused to let heartbreak have the final word. Their legacy lived on not in gold or land, but in the family they built, the lives they touched, and the enduring truth that love, patient and persistent, can transform even the most broken heart into something whole and beautiful again.